Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, January 29th, 5:28 a.m. Central Time. Grain markets are higher across the board this morning. March corn futures up 6 at 491 and a quarter. March soybeans up 7 and a quarter at 1052 and a quarter. March Chicago wheat up 4.5 at 549 and a half. March Kansas City wheat up 6.5 cents at 567 and a half. March spring wheat up 6 at 603 and three quarters. Let's start off with this funding freeze story.
A federal judge temporarily blocked President Donald Trump's federal funding freeze on Tuesday. The pause began minutes before the freeze was set to start and will continue until Monday. If initiated, the freeze will impact a broad range of sectors, from energy programs to foreign aid. Notably, the Inflation Reduction Act, which includes the 45Z tax credits, would be impacted. The administration implemented the freeze to allow time for a thorough review to ensure federal funding aligns with Trump's policy priorities. Programs that directly support Americans, such as Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, student loans, and food stamps, would not be impacted.
We had several questions come in regarding the $10 billion in direct payments that will be sent to farmers. Those payments will not be affected. They've got a deadline of March 21st to distribute those funds. So they're coming in the next couple of months here, the way that it looks. 45Z and the biofuel sector could be impacted here. I mean, we already know that there was a 45Z setback, and now that essentially any new policy is subject to this 90-day review. I don't know if I'd call this a setback, but it fits in with this funding freeze. There was at least one Republican lawmaker that introduced a bill to repeal 45Z and the tax credit. I think it was last week, the bill HR 549. I don't know if that's going to gain any traction or not, but I think with the direct payments, that's a lock. That's going to happen. 45Z is still kind of in flux, as we know.
Corn futures hovered just a few cents from their recent highs this morning. The most heavily traded March 25 contract peaked at 494 last week prior to a small correction. The U.S. supply and demand situation has tightened drastically over the last several months due to improved demand and a smaller than estimated 2024 U.S. crop. U.S. corn remains competitive on the export market. Farmers in Brazil have planted only 9% of the country's second and larger corn crop. Large money managers continue to hold a historically large net long position.
At yesterday's close, the private groups estimated that the funds were still net long 320 to 330,000 contracts of corn, which is a tremendously large position historically. This rally has been incredibly impressive. 91 cents in the March contract from the August low to the January high that was posted just last week. And we're only 3 or 4 cents away from those highs this morning. Even the new crop contracts acting a little bit better. The December 25 contract up to the mid 460s here this morning, just a penny or two away from the recent highs there. I pulled a continuation chart, which I think is kind of interesting. I threw some retracement lines on here. We went from the 2022 high, which was, peak inflation, Russia, Ukraine, all that stuff, down to the August low. And some of these retracement targets which, just a few weeks ago would have been like unheard of, the 38% retracement on a continuation basis near 538, 50% retracement near 593. Those numbers didn't seem at all plausible just a couple weeks ago. And now, maybe that 38% retracement at 538, maybe that is doable. I don't know. We're going to be competitive on the export market for a while. Brazil's second crop doesn't come online until, June or July. So I think for the next 3-4 months at least, U.S. corn should continue to be competitive on the export market. So lots of good news for the corn market.
Renewed tariff threats sent the dollar higher on Tuesday. The U.S. dollar advanced 0.6% against the Japanese yen and also gained 0.2% against the Swiss franc. On Monday, President Trump said he plans to put tariffs on imported computer chips, pharmaceuticals, and steel to encourage manufacturers to produce them here in the U.S. Trump has said he is considering 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico, while also threatening to impose tariffs on the EU and China. Easing concerns over DeepSeek, a low-cost Chinese AI model, also gave the dollar a boost yesterday.
So Trump continues to talk about Saturday, February 1st, as being tariff day, yet you wouldn't know that by looking at the grain markets. The corn market's essentially approaching recent highs. The soybean market is backed off, but it's held together okay. With regard to the currencies, the dollar rallied back, and it's been strong. It's really been strong since like third or fourth quarter of last year. And I can't help but wonder what the future of the dollar is. I think it's a big deal. The last time Trump was in office, the dollar trended lower for most of his term. Is that going to be the case this time around? I don't know. As it relates to our crowd here, our farm crowd, the relationship between the dollar and Brazil's currency is the much more important issue. This was a hugely positive thing for the Brazilian producer last year. The fact that the dollar gained 27% on the Brazilian currency in 2024, that was a big kind of bailout almost for the farmer in Brazil, where it was to the detriment of to the U.S. farmer. So far this year, the dollar's down 5% versus the Brazilian currency, and that could have something to do with the strength that we've seen in the soybean market here the last, say, 2 or 3 weeks.
So if you guys have not checked out our premium content, you sure need to do so. Joe, can you tell me about yesterday's premium video?
Pete Meyer was on yesterday looking cool in his shades. Don't hate the player. That was in relation to, we talked about a million things yesterday, everything from grain markets, grain marketing. We ran some 25, 26 U.S. corn and soybean balance sheets. The don't hate the player comment was with regard to carbon policy. We get a lot of questions or comments that come in from subscribers questioning the science of all of this, the carbon capture and sequestration. Is the science behind this actually legit? And Pete's answer was, don't hate the player, hate the game. What he means is that me or Pete or anybody else in our space, we have no control over the climate narrative. We can just tell you potentially what you can do to capitalize on it. If you guys want to go fight the climate fight, then go do that. But that's not anything that we can control. If you guys want to see the premium stuff, I'll mention again, if you haven't watched the video about the funds being net long 300,000 contracts of corn and what's next and what happens historically, the results are shocking. And if you don't understand how this works, you very much should. Go to standardgrain.com. You can sign up this morning. I will forward you a copy of this morning's email if you sign up early. And if not, you'll just be thrown on the email list. And we do 2 emails a day, 5 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Central. That's it. $50 a month. Cancel at any time. Give that deal a shot this morning, guys.
Sand was discovered in 51 truckloads of Brazilian soybean meal. Inspectors at the Port of Paranagua in southern Brazil discovered the contaminated meal, classifying it as product adulteration. The product originated in Mato Grosso, but authorities did not disclose the meal's destination. The majority of Brazilian meal exports go to the European Union. Inspectors rejected about 2% of grain trucks at the port last year for noncompliance. The incident coincides with China halting soybean shipments from 5 Brazilian companies for not meeting plant health requirements.
Adulterated soybean meal cargo. Doesn't it sound like biblical almost?
Yeah, it's very much so. Almost historical.
Yeah. Okay. So Brazil is supposed to be the second largest soybean meal exporter this year, 21 million metric tons. That would be 28% of all global meal exports. I'd venture to say that the market does not care about this. The meal market barely budged on this news yesterday. It's still big picture, I think, in bear market territory. Long story short, we're crushing a lot of beans in the U.S., and a lot of it has to do with biofuel. But you've got this problem, like, what do you do with the meal? And when you crush beans, 80% of the yield is meal, only 18% is oil. Those are ballpark numbers. Somebody in the processing space is probably going to comment and say, Joe, your numbers are off by a couple percent. They probably are, but just a ballpark estimate. So no, the meal market's not acting really well on that news.
We had another flash sale of corn yesterday. U.S. exporters sold 5 million bushels of corn to South Korea for delivery during the current marketing year. Current marketing year corn sales are the third best in the last 10 years.
Yep. And as I mentioned, we are competitive. I think we're going to continue to do some export business for the foreseeable future.
The Federal Reserve is expected to keep interest rates unchanged today. The anticipated decision comes even though President Donald Trump said last week he would demand interest rate cuts, even though he has no control over the Fed's decisions. The Fed is expected to make only 2 quarter-point rate cuts this year, with the first cut anticipated in June. Recent economic reports show progress in reducing inflation, but Fed officials want to see how Trump's policies play out and how they affect the economy. Some officials believe that Trump's proposed tariffs and mass deportations could lead to a resurgence in inflation. The rate decision will be released here this afternoon at 1 o'clock Central Time.
The Fed fund rate effectively is 4.375%. There are 2 cuts expected this year. I think inflation is still too hot. CPI, which is consumer inflation, Most recent print was 2.9% annualized increase. PPI, which is wholesale inflation, 3.3%. They want those numbers closer to 2. At least that's what they've said. Some people think that they've kind of quietly raised their inflation target. I don't know, but I feel like the cuts are, I mean, I think you're going to see 2 cuts, but any more than that might be excessive unless these inflation prints start to come down drastically. What did cattle do yesterday?
Cattle futures surged higher once again yesterday. Live cattle were up $1.25 to $3.45. Feeders were up $2.10 to $3.47. Box beef was higher. Choice gained $2.37 at $3.32.45. Select was up $1.41 at $3.21.96.
Outside market's pretty quiet. U.S. dollars up just a little bit. Stocks are mixed. Bonds are mixed. Gold's about flat. Crude oil is down 39 cents in the March WTI at 73.37. Have a great day, guys. We'll be back on Thursday